like, business owners, most of them fail, right? Like within the
Mm-hmm.
first, like I think a good chunk the first year, and then like maybe 80% after like 5 years.
You're right that there's so many ways that you can make your W-2 fit your lifestyle as a business owner. Which is why it's so nice to see healthcare workers who are doing business online.
My other rule of thumb for business is usually like I tell people it's a tough one. I say your business has to.
Welcome back to the Scrubs and Stocks podcast. Today's episode is one of my favorite episodes. Not saying everything is my favorite, but I absolutely love having our guest today in the podcast. He is a friend that I met on Instagram years ago in my investing journey. His name is Wilson Liang. He is a physician assistant, and I love talking with him about money, about investing. I apologize for my voice today, but without further ado, here is my interview with him. Okay. Thank you so much, Wilson, for being in the podcast today. For our audience who I know most of them also follow you, but for our audience who's just learning about you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do now?
Yeah. So it's great to be on here, Elaine. I know we talked about this. It's crazy. It was the time flies. You're like, I'm gonna do a podcast, and like, I'm like, when we get a chance, I would love to be on it. So thanks for having me on here. So my name's Wilson. I'm a PA. I've done a lot over my career, but primarily I've worked in oncology, and now I do informatics. So that's probably new. I know in PA it's not as common, but for nurses, informatics is actually probably the only reason I'm able to do informatics is because nurses, right, broke into
Yeah.
informatics, and I was able to join that side. And my wife, Stephanie, she's a nurse practitioner. So we love our jobs, and we're all about trying to balance everything. Like we love our jobs, but we also like investing, like you, right, as well. We do a lot of different things: index funds, real estate, starting our own businesses, and we it's been life changing for us, and we try to share what we know with everybody else.
Yeah, awesome. If you guys don't know, actually Wilson is like one of the first people I connected with on Instagram like last year. And we've had this talk about like me starting the podcast. And, I actually am happy to have him in the podcast today because it feels like we're just catching up like from last year, from like our last talk. And also because Wilson also has a lot of great resources for nurses and healthcare workers when it comes to investing. Now, Wilson, like, tell me a little bit about your how did you get into, learning about money, about investing and all that stuff?
Like when I talk to people, usually people don't really look into money. There's two things that usually cause people to look into money. Number one, I call it like financial disaster. Like you kind of hit a wall and you're like, oh shoot, I should probably look into this stuff. Or and this is less common. Like you inherit or you get a lot of money or your income explodes and you're not in pain, but you're like, I should probably think about
Mm-hmm.
doing something, right? Because my bank account is getting big. It's a good problem to have. Most of the time, for many of us, it's for especially for healthcare professionals, it's either credit card builds up too much,
Mm-hmm.
or like when student loans resumed and they were paused for a long time, everyone's like, oh shoot, I should think about my finances.
Yeah.
For me, what it was essentially like I grew up pretty low income. My parents were immigrants, so I didn't know much about money at the time. So I just learned to be frugal, saved. But I got into like credit card trouble in high school. Worked to pay it off, and then that was really all I knew about money. And I share this with my audience where like I didn't really start looking into money until a couple things happened. Number one, like my dad passed away from lung cancer. And because of that, I started having to at least look at the finances, at least in my household. And then I got into PA school, so then everything gets paused, and then you have to start learning about medicine. And when I almost graduated, I was it was a few months from graduating PA school. My mom, who's never asked me about retirement or like more specifics about money, she was like, "Hey, can I retire?" And that was the first time I was like, I don't even understand what that even means. I'm
Yeah.
like, can you? I don't know. She's like, I think I have a 401. I'm like, I don't know what that is. It's like, oh,
Uh-huh.
I have a pension. I'm like, I don't even know what that is either. So that was really my entry to finances, right? And it really upset me because I'm like, I don't know anything. And it's like, dang, I just finished school and I feel like I know some stuff, but then when it comes to money, I didn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, I studied that more than I studied medicine, figured it out for my mom, and I was like, wow, that was really painful. And I wonder,
Mm-hmm.
if the healthcare community and like, my friends and colleagues, we also know about finances as well. And turns out there's a huge gap in financial
Yeah.
literacy. So that's kind of how I got started. Kind of a long story, but it was,
Mm-hmm.
most of us, we don't, you kind of fall, either you fall into it, you find someone on social media, or like life makes you learn.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true because it almost, I just was talking with one of my students who also kind of said the same thing, that the only reason why she really got into, finances and really wanting to learn about money is because she grew up in the Philippines, and
Mm,
then she didn't have student loans. And then all of a sudden, like when she graduated from nursing school, like she was like faced with like paying it off, and she's like, I don't really even know how to prioritize everything.
yeah.
So it's almost like really out of necessity for the most part. And I think most of the people who really look up information online when it comes to money is because they're struggling with something, with their finances. Now, when you were looking for a career, did you always wanted to do to become a PA, or is this something kind of like you just decided like later on in life?
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like the typical Asian thing where,
It
it's
is.
it's either doctor or engineer. And
It
then
Yeah.
so I tried engineering. It was not good at it, like honestly. Like and looked into healthcare. I was leaning toward medical, but my
Mm-hmm.
honestly my grades were not good enough. And after actually shadowing a bunch of physicians, and I talked to them like, hey, would you recommend this to like, like
Mm-hmm.
the next generation or your children? And like 80% of them were like, absolutely not. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, that's interesting. And they're like, be a PA, like look into PA. And I shadowed a PA, and like, they had a really good lifestyle. Like it
Yeah.
was young, starting a family, seems pretty comfortable. And that's kind of how I fell into the profession.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask that because like not everybody knows about the PA profession, like the physician assistant, profession.
Yeah.
I actually went to NP school that is merged, or like it's like a dual
Oh,
track with a physician assistant. So our training is actually a physician assistant, training. I went to PA school essentially. And so all my classmates are mostly PAs, but you graduate with both NP and PA.
was that Davis?
Yeah, I went to
Yeah, is
Davis.
the only one I know of. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's really cool because like I think you said that your grades are not good enough, but to be honest with you, like I've really been around like the most like intelligent, smart people in PA school, and a lot of times like grades are not, we know it's not reflective of like someone's,
Hmm.
intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, it's really great that, there's this profession is something that not really an alternative, but like for someone who's like looking more into like a good work-life balance and doesn't really want to go through medical school, but still want to work in the healthcare field, like this, like it's a great career to have. You're now in informatics. How do you like being informatics from like working in a hospital role to now?
Yeah. It's, I would say like that's kind of the beautiful part about like whether it's a PA, NP, or nurse.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing that I like the most about these professions is you have so much, not just like vertical, like you can go up and down
Yeah.
mobility, but like lateral too.
Yeah.
Any specialty, any hospital, any practice setting, outpatient, you can do
Mm-hmm.
non-clinical too. Like you can, especially for nurses, like you can put a
Yeah.
nurse anywhere and like there's a job, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But I found my way into informatics. Um, I honestly I ran into it because I was reading up an article. It was on the AAPA website, and there was like, oh, there's a PA who teaches people how to optimize EHR. And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
hey, I do that a lot. I'm good with computers. Like how I started in healthcare was actually being a scribe and helping implement EHR like during that transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, in the beginning it was really hard because like I love patient care. All of us love patient care, right? I've done I think two
Mm-hmm.
fellowships. I did one for academia and one for oncology
Mm-hmm.
after graduation, and I was like die hard gunner. Like
Yeah.
I'm a practice medicine and die, in the hospital
Yeah.
if I need to.
Yeah.
And we get burnt out, especially if you're trying to do things outside of life. And informatics, it fit my personality well. It's a lot less stressful. I have more control over my schedule, and I mean the main thing is I think what's great about our profession is as my life changed and my goals in life changed, I was able to find a career that fit that situation and allowed me to balance both.
Yeah.
I like my job. I meet with nurses, I meet with PAs, NPs, and
Yeah.
physicians, and I show them cool stuff on Epic. But it's there's something about like with healthcare, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, it's like I tell people sometimes it's like you're on a hamster wheel that is on fire, and it just like you can't get off of it. And there are days where it's better, there are days where it's not, and it's like honestly, it's pretty depending on where you're at. It's I mean, you feel like it's never ending.
Yeah.
So for me, being able to take a break and switch to non-clinical and go to something that's more like project based,
Mm-hmm.
fit my personality and what I needed in life at that
Yeah.
time.
And do you miss working with patients?
Yeah, I do, but what's changed is like because I was able to like start my own business, I meet with people now,
Mm-hmm.
talk to them about their finances, and when I
Mm-hmm.
meet with in my day-to-day, I meet with clinicians, so I still at least get that kind of like
Connection.
connection advisory role, and in a
Mm-hmm.
way, I know I'm indirectly helping the patients because I'm
Yeah.
speeding everyone up on EHR.
True. Now, with with the informatics position that you have, did you need like a special certification or a special education to be able to do the work that you do?
Yeah, great question. So with informatics, it's such a broad realm. Where I focused the most on was primarily EHR, like optimization,
Mm.
specifically Epic optimization, right? There's other types where it's a little bit more coding heavy, where you have to need to have a technical background. Remember, like I was like I looked into engineering, I was not good at that, and I looked into informatics, like heavy technical heavy informatics. I'm like, yeah, no, it's the same thing. I can't do that either. So actually for me, breaking into at least the Epic optimization space, it was through a lot of networking. A lot of
Mm.
networking within my organization, talking to like, hey, is there a need for this? Do you need a PA to help train other providers? Because I saw it, I saw someone else did it. I'm like, does our organization need this? And then one thing led to another. I didn't need any additional training. A lot of us, especially for like EHR optimization, like we have to
Mm-hmm.
do it in our day-to-day,
Yeah.
like like no one's paper anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, usually they'll train you afterwards, and like I have a couple Epic certifications, but like that's through the employer. But
Yeah.
when I got hired, I didn't need any additional training.
Yeah. No, I think like people like you are kind of like the perfect person to put in positions like that because you've had the experience already with dealing with the software itself and at the
Yep.
same time with patients. So you have kind of like a better feedback than somebody who has not had that experience. When so did they have like that role before you come in, or is it like created because you kind of brought it up?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was the first PA, but I will say we did have educators, right? So my
Mhm.
official title is I'm an clinical informatics educator.
Mhm.
So it's true, like exactly like you described. There's the clinicians, there's the IT, the analyst team, and they don't
Oh,
know how to talk to each other. So
uh-huh.
then
So
we're
you're
we're
in
we're
between.
right in the middle, and we're like,
Uh-huh.
okay, like calm down, like let's figure it out together. But I will say, like, what's beautiful about like since I posted more about my job, other people have been doing what I've like done, and they've been going around in their organizations and saying, hey, this is a thing. Is this needed? And definitely as healthcare, we're becoming more AI, we're more
Mhm.
electronic, we're all electronic now. You have to have
Oh
some
yeah.
technology literacy. You have to.
Yeah.
So
And
it's oh, go ahead.
that's a good thing to bring up because like the day and age now is so different from before.
Yeah.
The need for AI related, like resources when it comes to like healthcare and how we're able to give that care for our patients and even like the charting and all that other things definitely is something that's very, very different now.
Yeah.
Now,
It's cover your ass medicine, right?
it
It's
is.
da-da-da-da-da-da.
It is. It's so crazy. Um, I would say that it's gotten much more like I guess like tech
Yeah.
heavy, like when it comes because back then when I started my nursing career, we actually have paper
Paper.
charting.
Yep.
It's so crazy nowadays that with Epic and all that stuff that everything has changed. You have like from what I've seen, you juggle a lot of things too, because this is something that we talked about the last time we had a conversation about how we both were starting. You had your business already, I'm starting my business, and like doing it on the side while you work your full-time job. How is it right now with you having to work your nursing informatics job and your business? Oh, before we actually go to that, can you tell us a little bit about what side business or what what side hustle you have going on right now while you're working your full-time job.
Yeah, great question. Um, so essentially like I have an Instagram and I also have kind of like a mentorship program, right? So on Instagram you can find me at so what is it, at Wilson underscore, I guess, underscore invest.
Uh-huh.
And essentially like how this all started was after I learned so much about our careers, finance, loans, I realized like there wasn't any like PA specific or NP specific
Mm-hmm.
information out there. I shared with my classmates first. We had this Google Doc that we were passing around, and then eventually other schools from like I was like, who are these people in my Google Doc? It's like people from other schools, and I realized, oh,
Wow.
we hit the limit for the people that could collaborate on a
So
thing. So I was
crazy.
like, oh, sounds like people people like want this information. So I started lecturing at different schools, and eventually I'm like, what's the best way to spread this information? Surprisingly, Instagram. A lot of people go to social media
Mm-hmm.
for financial advice, and there's pros and cons of that, right? Like I would argue there's more bad advice, honestly, than good advice. But I started posting on social media, but then I realized too, it's like, well, I care deeply about these people too, right? It resonates with me, right? We're all healthcare
Mm-hmm.
providers. We're all trying to take care of our patients, but also take care of our finances in our lives. And I would post a lot, but then people would like, oh, do you have time? Like, can you like, do you meet one on one, et cetera, et cetera. And I think over time I've developed this I call it a mentorship program. I meet one on one PAs, NP, nurses, healthcare professionals, or anyone just learning about money. And essentially, I've learned so much over the years, and I'm like what I'm really focused on is helping people not necessarily become financially free like ASAP, because like as you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
not easy to be like
Yeah.
financially free,
Mm-hmm.
but I really try to get them to at least part-time as soon as possible. Most of my clients,
Mm-hmm.
they go part-time within 5 to 10 years, but they're still wealthier compared to most people,
Yeah.
right? So we teach them about how to level up your careers. I free up you from your debt, from your free up your schedule, right? So I always my model is like I help you earn more, but you work less. It blows people's
Yeah.
mind, and you're
Mm-hmm.
building wealth over time, and you have more options. And a lot of people think traditional retirement, like you gotta grind, 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 wait till 65. I tell people retirement's a spectrum. It's a sliding scale. You can ease into it, right? There's so many
Mm-hmm.
different models of retirement now, and you don't have to wait 30 years to like start enjoying life. So that's what I help people do because it's hard to do this like just learning online, and it's scary when you don't have like a mentor. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to make myself available, and
Yeah.
luckily, if I was doing I before I used to work 3/12s. So I used to work inpatient, but you know how it is. You work 3/12s, like, and then you're like you 4 days off. I'm like, no, I need 2 days to recover.
Yeah.
So and then I don't want to work on stuff during the off days. So um it's just a lot of time management, project management, and just being intentional, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tracking your time blocking, and just really like knowing your why, focusing, and then everything else
Mm-hmm.
would kind of figure itself out.
Yeah. And, this just really proves that, what we believe that, I mean, like what we advocate for, that you don't necessarily need to work harder in order for you to be wealthier or richer. Like it's actually the opposite. Like the less you work, the more money you make if you know how to kind of set that foundation to be able to live like that. And I really love that there are people like you who are really like sending this message out to like other healthcare workers, because I actually there was like a study or something. I don't really necessarily I don't remember it is, but like people who work part-time are like happier than people who work
Mhm.
full-time, something like that, where um people who also do per diem nursing, like as needed nursing, are much more happier nurses than somebody who works like full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to somebody like a nurse who's like listening right now, who's working full time, would be
Mm.
the first thing that they need to do in order to get to that point where they're not working more hours, but they're making more?
Mm. That's a great question. And one thing I'll add really quickly is that you said per diem, there's locums too,
Oh,
right?
true. That's
It's
true.
whether it's travel, locums, or per diem, it's crazy where you work
Uh-huh.
less, but you make more. You actually make way more, and you end up becoming wealthier. It's like the craziest thing. So,
Mhm.
ooh, okay. So to answer your question, it's so crazy because it's really a couple things. I think number one, you have to like know what's possible out there. So like oftentimes it's what's hard is like when you're in medicine. you kind of just follow the order that everybody else is going in,
Yeah.
right? Like you just finish school, get good grades, study, pass the exam, and then you go into the hospital. Then you just then you go up the ladder. They're smart. They set it up this way. Then there's like a
Yeah.
thousand ladders and a thousand certificates you can get, so you get distracted, right? What I
Mm-hmm.
tell people is like try to, especially for nurses, it's like what you should something you could do is like look to see who has really good work, like who is so dang happy at work,
Mm.
who's really happy at work, and who seems to have a great life outside of work,
Yeah.
and talk to those people and see what's going on, right? You'll either most of the time you'll find that they're probably doing something else on the side, maintaining work-life balance, investing, or they're buried in debt, right? That's sometimes you find that, oh, you're not doing as well as I think you were. But just see like what's possible and have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with them. And people who actually are doing really well and have like really good work-life balance, if you reach out, they will give. Right. I'm sure if someone came up to you, came up to
Yeah.
me, we got to where we were because,
Mm-hmm.
we had good mentors, we learned what was possible,
Yeah.
and we love contributing. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say like look to see, don't look for the person who's grinding the hardest. Look for the person who's like kind of low key and like just
Mm-hmm.
gets in, gets out, but seems to have a good life and good
Yeah.
family and things they're doing outside of work. And ask them like, what are you like? Do you do you invest? Like,
What's
what do
going
you do?
on?
What's going on? Like, you're something's different, right? And
What's your secret?
exactly. Like try to go from there and just, I mean,
Uh-huh.
honestly, like I got to where I am just because I saw what others were doing, and it's like, wow, they do have a life outside of work. They're doing all these different things I didn't know existed, and it's just being
Mm-hmm.
curious, right?
Yeah. No, I love that because it's crazy that people always say you have to get in rooms where, people are probably more successful than you or probably the smartest people in the room. You have to
Hmm.
surround yourself, how like they say the average what is it? Like the five people you spend with, like,
Hmm.
that's how you're going to be, which is so true because
Hmm.
proximity really plays such a big part. And then one thing about that is because of what you had mentioned, that if you're around people who are successful, who are happy, who are having this good work life balance, it gives you kind of like that idea or that possibility that, hey, like if someone else is doing it, like why can't I do it? Like if I put myself in, like as a business owner with somebody who's making millions of dollars in 1 year, like how are they doing
How?
it? Like, and like if they can do it, I can do it too, like so I really love that because I think that that's one of the things that people need to do first is to actually surround themselves with people who are, like who are talking about money, who are talking about all these
Hmm.
things that you want to achieve. So, did you have to do this like yourself, like putting yourself out in like how did you actually like surround yourself with people like this?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. So like honestly, I would say when I first started looking into personal finance, at least was like what 2000, probably 2018,
Mm-hmm.
17, 18.
Around the same time as me, yeah.
There wasn't that much out there, especially for healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it, like honestly, the first place I went to was like Reddit. Like out of
Yeah.
all places, right? It's like you go. The normal trajectory is like you go personal finance, which is great, and then you go to
Yeah.
financial independence, and then
Uh-huh.
eventually, a lot of us we find white coat investor,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the order I went in, and then you
Mm-hmm.
just start reading. But honestly, it was super lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole
It
time,
is.
I'm studying and I'm like reading every blog article when there's forums that people can be weird and they're not nice. Oftentimes they're not that nice.
Not in
Sometimes they
Reddit.
not on Reddit, right? And honestly, it was. I mean, I was mentioning earlier, I studied more than I did medicine and
Mm-hmm.
probably thousands and thousands of hours just like trying to understand all of this. And it was honestly pretty stressful because at the end
Yeah.
of it, you still don't know if you're correct.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was until I what was it? I think two things. One, at a certain point, I met with a CFP,
Uh-huh.
right? And I met with a bunch of advisors. Like I didn't have like a lot of us don't have a good first experience with
Yeah.
advisors, right? Because there's people who are actual advisors and there are people who are just trying to sell you stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience was not the best until I learned, oh, this is how you look for the right investor. I mean, the right advisor, CFP. And they looked at everything I was doing and they were like, yeah, like there's nothing I can add. Like, good job. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, is that true? And then I checked with another one, and then they're like,
Yeah.
same thing. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
there's some validation, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until I started like Man, it wasn't until I started talking more about this stuff and then finding other people like you, right, who are
Mm-hmm.
doing similar things that make you feel
Yeah.
like you're not crazy. And then eventually you go into you go to like conferences. There's like so I
Mm-hmm.
recommend doing conferences. Eventually I got into real estate, and with real estate, you have to network and you have to
Mm-hmm.
meet people. Like with
Yeah.
index funds, you cannot be social and you'll be wealthy, and then no one will know it. With real
Yeah.
estate, it's really hard to like not network, especially if you're doing active real estate.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's a lonely journey, right? Because you're especially like for your audience and my audience, right? We're trying to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest part, I tell people, like becoming like financially successful is 80% behavioral
Mm-hmm.
and staying with like the foundations and sticking with the boring stuff. And then 20, like that's it's all behavioral, and 20% of it is the actual strategy,
Yeah.
right? It also requires you then to do things differently than
Mm-hmm.
what you see in your day to day.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, like you feel crazy, people don't understand what you're doing. You're like, why are you trying to
Mm.
save money? Why do you invest so much? Why aren't you going out, et cetera, et cetera? And there's a period where you have to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot easier once you find kind of a community.
It's so big. Like community is so big when it comes to like wanting to reach like specific goals in life.
Mm,
Because that's what you said. Like a lot of times, like it's so lonely to, because I was the same way. I just kind of like taught myself with most of these
yeah,
things. Like I was to a point where I was listening to like podcasts and like reading books like almost every week. And like with index funds, like you could just do it yourself and that's it, right? Like you
you just
just,
click and
but
you're like, was that it? I think
no,
that's
but then
it.
like once you get into like the whole thing, like you realize that there's so many other ways to diversify
Hmm.
your investments. And I love that you also started kind of the same way as I am. And I feel that we kind of shared the same like values and like we're, I don't know if you're an introvert, but you know, like if you love like if you're not big into networking, that kind of
Hmm.
stuff, like because I'm not very big in networking, but I realize that it's one of those things that's essential if you really want to be successful because that's what you mentioned, like you need a community. Like community is so big if you want to be
Hmm.
successful. You cannot do everything or you know all these things by yourself. So for your what do you call that? Like now I want to get into the diversification of investments since we're
Hmm.
talking about it. You mentioned you were an index funds, you know, kind of guy
Hmm.
initially. What made you get into real estate? Like what started the whole real estate? Because right now you do have a portfolio of real estate and you and Steph are pretty big on real estate investing. And how did you kind of like not transition, but kind of like when did you start to realize that okay, I need to start diversifying
Yeah,
this?
that's a good question. So I would say like I think you've talked about this too a lot. Index funds honestly is the best place to start, and for a lot of people, that's a great place to stay too. Right?
Yeah.
Because there is nothing else as passive and as proven as index funds. They work. They just take a little bit. And if
Yeah.
you the only way to go faster for index funds is you have to put more in.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
If you want to learn how you can get started with investing and how you can automate it while working your full time job, I have a masterclass that teaches you everything step by step on how to invest, what investments to pick, and also different kinds of investments account that you can do as a nurse. Check out my link at nurseinvest.com/investing101 so you can register for this masterclass. Because you're a listener of this podcast, I have a special code for you. If you use the code INVESTREADY, all in caps, you will get $100 off of this masterclass if you enroll now.
And it's so we were doing index funds. I mean, like some of the first millionaires I met, they just purely did index funds, right? If you look at the personal finance fire movement, most
Mm-hmm.
of the people are just pure index funds. And
Index
then
funds, yeah.
when we started, like I think the main reason we started looking into real estate was if you wanted to achieve, I think, financial freedom a lot sooner, and you're willing to take leverage, and you're
Mm-hmm.
using willing to use leverage, and you do real estate correctly, it can move you a lot faster,
Yeah.
right? Index funds for pure, like true financial freedom takes a couple decades,
Mm-hmm.
right? Depending on how aggressive you are. But like I tell people, like it takes at least 10 years to make at least some meaningful
Yeah.
movement. Where real estate, if done correctly, right, in a couple of years, you can mimic the same
Mm-hmm.
effect. The issue with that too is people see that and they think, oh, I'm just going to do real estate
Yeah.
instead. it's actually you have to come from a really good like financial position
Mm-hmm.
in order to do real estate well, right?
Mm.
And the reason like I tell people to start with index funds is because you literally click and you forget, and
Yeah.
you are pretty well diversified, and you'll get decent returns, and it'll take a little
Mm-hmm.
bit before it really ramps up. But like you can't really mess it up. Like you really
Yeah.
cannot.
Yeah.
And during this time, I tell people, well, while you're doing index funds, like start figuring out your finances, right? And start figuring out your career. Because in order to do real estate, you need to have, a good amount of money saved.
Mm-hmm.
You have to also have like you have to be in great mental health and also good physical health if
Yeah.
depending on how active you want to be. And then you also have to have like good work-life balance and a good schedule, depending on the
Mm-hmm.
types of real estate investing you want to do.
Oh, yeah. That's so
So
true.
so if people are like I don't save the most, or like my schedule is crazy, or like my job's super toxic, like real estate's gonna fix it. I'm like, it's gonna make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna make it
Yeah.
way worse. So for us, it really took, for us, it wasn't until like we got close to like 1 million in index funds before we looked into real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's lucrative. So we have two duplexes. We manage out of state. We have two luxury short-term rentals that we operate as well. We have a 52 apartment um, partnership that we did. And then
Mm.
we're also in syndications and private real estate funds. So we've done a lot. We've looked into everything. And then the main reason we were able to do that was also because of the foundation we built from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like I tell people real estate is it's a more advanced strategy, and it helps accelerate. If you're doing well already, it will accelerate you. But if you're
Yeah.
doing poorly already, if
Yeah.
you're not good at work, if work is stressful, if you're not good with your finances, real estate will like ruin your life. It
Yeah.
will just make that go downhill.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I am so proud of you and Steph. Like you guys have grown so much in the last like year, like your portfolio, even like all your achievements. It's just nice to see you guys like thrive. And I also am very, very, I agree so much with what you said because I know a bunch of people who go straight to real estate because of that whole how it's portrayed, in social media when real estate investors talk about like the returns and everything. It's very, very enticing to go straight to real estate because people
Hmm.
think that the money is in there. And some people would say that, oh my gosh, like, I want to be rich. I want financial freedom. Let me buy this duplex or whatever.
Hmm.
And, would you say that, I mean, you kind of already mentioned it that you gotta have a good, strong financial foundation in investing in stock market first before real estate investing. Would
Yeah.
you say that that's necessary?
Yeah, I mean, like you can do it. You'll just be a lot like when things don't
Stress.
like because if you look at the people who do well in real estate, they were doing well like already before real
Mm-hmm.
estate.
Yeah.
For most people, like yeah, sure you can put like no money down. Yeah, you can
Mm-hmm.
leverage. You can do all these like things that people are doing nowadays. But when things don't go well and like real estate doesn't do well and you have no foundation and you're all on like leverage debt,
Yeah.
it's not gonna be fun. It's gonna be actually really stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And like real estate's also a long-term game too,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't think anything honestly that builds real wealth like
Yeah.
is get rich quick. Like there is nothing like that exists, right? Sometimes people
Mm-hmm.
get lucky, but you can't recreate it. Even
Yeah.
with real estate, you're right. Like you buy a duplex and like you bought it correct, it cash flows. You're like, yay, like $300 a
Mm-hmm.
month, and that's not
Yeah.
going to change your life. You need to buy a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So it really depends on your goals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people do real estate to accelerate. Some people do it for diversification. Some people
Yeah.
just do it to challenge themselves and to be fun. But
Mm-hmm.
like even when it comes to index fund investing, when it comes to like changing jobs, when it comes to real estate, you have to make sure like you understand why you're doing it first. Because
Mm,
they're all
yeah.
they're all like chess pieces. They
Yeah.
all serve their own role, and you don't just want
Mm-hmm.
to do something because someone else is doing it.
Yeah. It's so important to really look into your own like goals because like for me, like initially I was like enticed to buy, like all this like commercial real
Yeah,
estate.
yeah.
Like
It's so much
even
work. Oh my
it
God.
is no even active real estate. Like I'm so like when I see somebody, I would tell my husband, like, are you ready to buy this and this? But then like we always kind of go back to talking about our goals.
Mm,
Like is this something that we really want to do like on the side
right.
or something because we had talked about this before
Hmm.
how like your Airbnb is really a business like on the side that you have to actively work for. It's not one of those things that you can just like, oh, I'm gonna buy this like rental property somewhere and like rent it out and that's it. Like if a guest has to talk to somebody, if something breaks in the house,
Hmm.
it's another, business on the side that you have to be willing to, like put your time into. Um you and Steph are obviously like a good like team because you guys have each like roles when it comes to you guys' like business and all that
Hmm.
stuff. How how do you guys find time to like do all of these?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And, before I answer that one, I wanted to say like you nailed it where it's like real estate is really it's a business in disguise. And like the real estate owners and the people who treat it like a business, like you'll know if you talk to them, most of us don't actually like eat from the profits for a long
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
A lot of the money we make from real estate goes right back into real
Mm.
estate. So like what we're actually spending in our day to day is still from like our W-2.
Yeah.
And that's what you're supposed to do, right? Real estate is a long-term thing. Even for Airbnbs, yeah, they do
Mm-hmm.
well, but you're
Yeah.
right, they're a lot of work. But then same thing, like they're expensive. And if
Uh-huh.
things go wrong, you want to make sure you're prepared. So oftentimes, even if these things are doing well, you're still not eating from them either. So people don't realize that.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure who you listen to because sometimes you
Yeah.
get in and you realize, oh no, like I have all this debt, all this mortgage, but then what? I only profit this much, and if even if I profit a lot, I can't touch it. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
depends on who your mentors are, right?
Yeah.
Um, but to answer your question, with Steph and I, oh my gosh, it's like you probably know this too. Like people who do well financially, most of the time too, I think there's a study. I think I saw this recently online. It's like when you look at a lot of millionaires, like 80% of them were couples.
Mm.
Like, right? It's because it's so much harder to do it by yourself.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So hard. And I mean, for us, it was a lot. I mean, Stephanie and I we're completely different personalities. Like everything
Mm-hmm.
is different. Personality, work personality, investing kind of personalities. We're all different. But um, I think a lot of it is just like like always taking a step back and just understanding like what are we working towards like as a
Yeah.
family as a couple like
Mm-hmm.
knowing your why knowing your vision that's so
Yeah.
important
It's
because
always
otherwise you'll just be following other people and then when you get there you're like was this what I actually wanted you don't want to do that
yeah.
and for us we it's so lame I'm sure you do this too it's like I have to schedule meetings like we have to schedule meetings with each other right? You have to schedule
Yeah.
meetings for business, schedule meetings for personal life, schedule meetings for finances, schedule meetings for like vacation and like time with friends. Because
Yeah.
if you don't put it on your schedule, you're not intentional
Yeah.
about it, it won't happen.
Yeah.
So we have it's lame, but like, we have a lot of just pre-blocked time
Mm-hmm.
throughout like our schedules and like throughout the week to say like we should
Mm-hmm.
probably be intentional and meet with each other and just make sure like are we still doing things that are aligned like in all
Yeah.
aspects of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the same way because I'm such a big planner. I always tell people if it's not in my calendar, it's not gonna happen or it's probably not gonna be a priority because like time is so important
Mm,
that and it's so limited too, right? Like it's like we have only limited amount of time in a day and like if we don't do it intentionally, like things that we do throughout the day, it's like you could be doing things that are not necessarily aligned with what you want to achieve long term.
yeah.
And no, I just wanted to really kind of touch on like the importance of having a W-2
Mm,
because I know you love the work that you do. You love your job. And we talked about this before of how like we are okay right now. Like it's good right now to be balancing, both because
yep.
we're still able to do it. How would you um do you think like for yourself personally, this is something like I mean, like when do you decide that it's time to jump from full-time,
Mm.
like being a W-2 to doing business full-time? That's including your own business and real estate.
Yeah. Ooh, I mean, I swear we think about this like all the time.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, there are a couple rule of thumbs I have. I think the first thing is like whether it's an investment or whether it's your W-2, if like pretend like in the context of W-2,
Mm-hmm.
if you're working your W-2 and you're still allowed to do the things you want to do in life, like don't quit.
Yeah.
Like if you want to do a business, if you want to spend time with your family, if you want to travel and like your W-2 doesn't get in the way of all that, you don't have to quit.
Yeah.
right? And so like, but if you're someone trying to start a business, you're trying to travel more, you're doing all these things, the way to think about, like, instead of saying I need to quit my W-2, the question I pose. Now, I think we've had conversations about this where it's like, what are things you can do to your W-2 to make it adjust to your life?
Yeah.
So like, especially I know a lot of your audience is nurses. A lot of people who go into nursing only know bedside.
Yeah.
But if you go outpatient, if you do like infusion, or you
Mm-hmm.
go non-clinical, you go sales or
Yeah.
research, right? Your life can change. It's very different.
Yeah.
And then now you might be able to have that balance to do other things. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the first challenge. It's like, how do you make your W-2 fit like what you need in life?
Mm.
Right. And for me, and then my other rule of thumb for business is usually like I tell people it's a tough one. I say your business has to gross gross twice what you currently make for at least
Yeah.
2 years, and then you can think about it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that comes with the W-2, especially in healthcare. Like it's so
Mm-hmm.
stable.
Yeah.
We're recession proof, we're pandemic proof, we're everything proof.
Yeah.
And then they're always short. So then if you
Mm-hmm.
always need more money, I tell people like healthcare is like a really good bond. Like you don't need bonds,
Yeah.
just keep working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really safe.
No, it's so true because like as somebody who's like doing business on the side, I constantly like question if it's something that I should be doing full time
Mm,
versus, but like you're so right that I cannot compare like my 9 to 5 as a healthcare worker or as a nurse practitioner than somebody who's doing corporate, nine to
yeah,
five. And for the most part, a lot of people, which is why it's so nice to see healthcare workers who are doing business online because it's so different because like when you look at somebody because it's kind of stupid. I've been like before when I was in the verge of like quitting my full time to
mm,
do this, everything that I look up online, like podcast, Reddit, is like quit 9 to 5 to do full time business, right? Like,
yeah,
or how to go all in on your side hustle. And of course, like you'll see people who are like, oh, it's the best decision ever and all that stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But because a lot of times, like corporate, like 9 to 5 is different from like working in
It's
business. And
true.
like what you said, like for me being a nurse practitioner now working in the clinic, I feel like I have actually more time to work on my business versus if I would be working an office job or like probably even as a bedside nurse. Like,
Yeah.
as a bedside nurse, there's no way I can, because by the time I get home, I'm
So
sleeping.
tired, so tired.
Yeah, or even on my day off, because I used to work night shift as a nurse. It's so hard to do side hustles if you so kudos to those doing 312s and bedside and still doing side hustles because it's hard. But
Yeah.
you're right that there's so many ways that you can make your W-2 fit your lifestyle as a business owner.
Yeah. Like I tell people like at a certain point, you can think about like treating your job, your main, I think we talked about this, like make your main job a side hustle.
Yeah, we
Just
talked
change,
about
just
this last
change,
time.
just change the perspective, right? It's like, well, how do I get my job to be more chill? Like it pays me really well. Because it's like if you wanted to, like people like when they start their business, they'll realize, my gosh, it is business is hard. And the numbers, it's so stressful, and like you don't realize how much your employer pays for everything
Hmm.
else, and like how nice it is just to have reliable income.
Yeah.
So then, I think the conversation we had is like, what are things we could do to our jobs to make it like less stressful, fit your life better, like make that a side hustle,
Hmm.
right? It's like, okay, how much time do you actually put into your job? Well, I actually put in like 20 hours or 30 hours because you could
Yeah.
start scaling your hours less and less
Yeah.
if you want. You don't have to just quit.
Hmm.
But then
Yeah.
it's like, in order to do that, it's like, well, if I'm still able to like, because you could still grow your business at the same time, but then at least with the W-2, like it's your bread and butter. You can always turn it on and off if you wanted
Hmm.
to.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's it's what you'll love this statistic where like business owners most of them fail, right? Like within the first,
Hmm.
like I think a good chunk the first year, and then like maybe 80% after like 5 years, most people
Yeah.
are out of the game. People
Yeah.
who are a professional, if you're a professional, like you do something like a W-2 or you're very good at what you do and you end up starting a business on the side too, those businesses have a really high success rate
Mm.
because the number one reason people their businesses fail is because they run out of money.
Yeah.
But here, if you do both, you'll never run out of money, so you have enough time to let that business develop, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it's interesting. People who do side hustles end up doing it full time, but it's like they had really stable income
Yeah.
throughout. I mean, props to people who go all in, but that's really scary, especially
It
if you
is.
have debt, if you have children, if you have other
Oh
people that are
yeah.
dependent on you, that's really stressful.
Mm-hmm. I talked about that in one of my episodes because I feel that one of the things it's so I mean sometimes it's romanticized, sometimes like the idea of going all in on a business, but
Hmm.
then you put into consideration factors like like having kids or being the only breadwinner
Yeah.
or like people relying on your income, that kind of stuff. Like it's whole different ball game. And like how sometimes you're right. Like you don't have to necessarily like quit. Like there are so many things that you can do to make it work. And for me, ever since you told me that whole concept of making it a side hustle, like
Yeah.
my W2, the actual side hustle, that's actually how it's been for me in the past, months.
Awesome.
Because like I was like thinking about it, I was like, I was having a bad day at work one time
Yeah.
and I was like, well, this is my side hustle. Like I don't really, care much about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Like you
Like
don't
in a
derive,
sense,
yeah, you don't derive your value or your identity to work, at
yeah.
least as a healthcare provider, right?
Yeah, and like your energy is so valuable too, along with your time, that I am not going to spend most of my energy trying to stress out about my W2
Hmm.
if I have other things that are more important for me that I'm like creating or building on the side. And I really love that you're able to kind of like shed a light on those people who are probably wondering if they should quit their full-time job
Hmm.
versus, like, because you can do it both. Like you can do it on the side. I mean, it may not be sustainable long term, but that's when your whole what you just mentioned earlier, that real estate business, it's a long-term game.
Yeah.
Like you have to have some safety net while it's building long term, because
Yeah.
I think that like once you get to that point where it's like strong enough or like the foundation's good enough that you can actually get rid of that safety net, then that may be the time to switch to full
Agreed.
entrepreneurship.
Agreed. I mean, like it
Yeah.
comes like when it comes to like stocks, when it comes to real estate, and when it comes to business, like
Mm-hmm.
who wins? It's people who stay the longest.
Yes.
You just do the same thing over and over and over, and then it take whoever's still around after a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, right? And
Mm-hmm.
whether you're holding stocks, you're holding real estate, or you've like hopefully with the hopefully with the business, if you've done it that long, like you're successful, but
Yeah.
like you will win. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that's the hard part where it's
Mm-hmm.
like you don't see that, right? People, a lot of people, there's a lot of like instant gratification nowadays
Mm-hmm.
where they're like, I can do all this, I'll take all the leverage and I'll like,
Yeah.
in 1 year you'll be free. It's like that's
Yeah.
not possible.
Mm-hmm. And it's so crazy because I was I was actually, I think I was taking a copywriting course, and then they said at one point that the only reason why people who are successful like in the craft that they do is because of that long-term thing.
Yeah.
And the reasoning for that is because if you're doing things consistently for a long period of time, you have kind of that opportunity to iterate and like improve on the things
Yeah.
that you wanna like do long term, which is
Hmm.
so crazy because like I always like people always want like the returns right away, like with stocks and all that stuff,
Hmm.
but then like the longer you actually invest while your money's growing, the more you'll realize how risk tolerant you could be,
Hmm.
and the more you get educated on what works for you and what doesn't work and which one's going to make you more money in the long
Yeah.
term.
Yeah, it's I love that because it's all about expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like wherever you're learning from, and then whoever you're reading about. Like we don't invest, like you and I, right? We don't invest to become rich, right?
Yeah.
We invest because we have goals we want to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, it's time freedom for a lot of us, or it's
Yeah.
like to have the ability to choose and to be not dependent on your W-2
Mm-hmm.
fully. But then it's like if you invest purely to like say I want to be rich, I want to be a millionaire, you're gonna fail
Mm-hmm.
because like you'll get there and you realize like well
Yeah.
nothing changes, right?
Yeah.
So you have to really make sure you have the right expectations when you're
Mm-hmm.
investing. You have to know like why you're doing it in the first place, and then it has to like with your investments it has to match with your situation, match with your personality, and
Mm-hmm.
also like make sure like by doing this like what does it get me to. And
Yeah.
if you don't have the answer to that, got to do some soul searching, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you don't just invest because you have to
Yeah.
and because someone tells you to. You have to understand like why is that important
Mm,
to me in my situation?
yeah. Because I mean, like everyone tells you it's, important that you invest your money, this and that. But at the end of the day, it's really what your goal is when it comes to
Hmm.
your investing that really matters. Because, oh my gosh, like I love that because like people always want to be a millionaire or like they want to, but then like you hear the stories of people like hitting that goal and then they get there and they're like, what now?
What was
Like
the
what's
point?
yeah, what's the point? What's next? And this is why, even rich people are not happy because uh like I think that a lot of times like we think that when we see something in social media or like when we aspire to be something
Hmm.
like just for the sake of like doing it because someone else is doing it, it really takes away from the whole point of actually doing it. I don't know if that makes sense because like when people tell me that, oh, I want to invest because I want to hit like this net worth.
Hmm.
Okay, you
Why?
hit that
Why?
net worth. Yeah, why? Like what when you hit that net worth, what's going to happen, right? So it goes much deeper than just the numbers pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. I mean, I'll share one thing with you and your audience. Like when I work
Mhm.
with clients, the question, one of the first questions I always ask them, and
Mhm.
so if any of my clients are listening, they're going to get PTSD from
PTSD.
this, because I tell them like, well, okay, let's take a second and pause and say like, pretend there's a world where you have all the time in the world,
Mhm.
you have all the money in the world, and I took away all societal pressure. I took away pressure that your family gives you. I take away the pressure that your spouse
Mhm.
maybe gives you, and I take away the pressure that you give yourself.
Yeah.
And you have complete freedom. What does your life look like now? Like, right, where will you be? Where will you be living? What will you be doing in your day to day? Who's going to be with you? And like, what are things you're doing that make
Mhm.
you fulfilled at this time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just tell people like that's the you have to. I mean, I mean I call it the why. You can also call it like vivid vision. You can call it vivid vision too. Like, what is that life you are working towards, right? Because
Yeah.
ultimately, for you and I, it's not necessarily that we want to make people wealthy.
Mhm.
We want to help people have options. That's the
Yeah.
biggest thing, and like so they can live the life they want to live. Like
Yeah.
money is just a tool to get you there. Our
Yeah.
careers is a tool to get us there. But then, for us to really help you, we have to understand, like, if I got you there, I got you time freedom, I got you financial freedom, and I took away pressure. Like, who are you? And
Yeah.
that freaks a lot of people out. They're like, oh, I don't know, right? Like, I've never thought about that.
That
And
is so good. Yeah.
yeah, because if you don't know what that is, and like if you and I don't know what that is, then it's really hard to help you because it's like, yeah, invest in an index fund, put money in your Roth, all these things, but like for what? And if we don't
Mhm.
know, I would say like a good coach, a good mentor will be hard on you for that
Yeah.
because we want to help you, but if you don't know where you want to go, we can't really do anything about it.
Mhm. If you don't know what your, whole goals are or like what you would
Hmm.
do if you have everything that you need financially,
Yeah.
then it's not really gonna make a difference.
Story. You should take
Yeah.
pause. You should take pause because I think people with a lot of experience who have done this for a long time,
Mhm.
they'll listen. They'll listen. They'll hear what you have to say, what you're trying to get to. And sometimes like the freedom they want, you just have to make a few changes in their life now. And
Yeah.
like, oh, if that's all you wanted, change the career or
Yeah.
just like don't spend here. And like,
Yeah.
boom, what you wanted, you don't need to be a millionaire to get it. You just make a few
Yeah.
changes and boom, you're there.
Mhm. Okay, I just figured out. It's called Kinder 3.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's there's a famous like certified financial planner who coined this term. It's pretty much like three questions about life. Like the first one is like what you had just mentioned. Imagine a life where you're financially secure. Like how would
Hmm.
you change your life? What would you do with the money? What would you change about your life if you already have everything like
Yeah.
money wise? And then the second question is, what will you do if the doctor tells you that you have
Hmm.
5, 10 years to live? Will you change your life? Like, what, like, will you, like, how will you do it? And what will you do with the time remaining? And then the third question is ask yourself, like, what dreams will be left unfulfilled?
Mm.
And what do I wish if I had finished? or had been, or if the wish had been, done. It's a good way to kind of reflect on your own goals and values, because those two has to align in
Correct.
order for you to be happy. And it goes back to like what you said, that with that said, like when people ask me like when they should retire, or like how much they need to retire, or like people who bag on me when I say that I'm gonna retire with this amount of money, and they're like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that's not enough.
yeah.
But it all kind of wraps up to the point that everybody has different
Correct.
goals. And like if that doesn't suit you, then that's probably not for you. Right?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I love that, and in healthcare, a lot of us, I joke around. It's like we walk around with these helmets on our heads, and
Mm-hmm.
like, and so you can't hear that well, you can't see that well. It's an ugly helmet, and you walk around, you just get whacked on it all day,
Yeah.
and then you look around, then you look at your colleague, they're just getting pounded, and then you're like, oh, that's normal. And then so with these questions, I'm sure you
Yeah.
do the same thing too, where our goal is to take that off and be like,
Yeah.
okay, like who are you? And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just been in chaos this whole time,
Yeah.
and it makes you take pause, and I love, thanks for looking that up and like finding the official name for it, because it
Mm-hmm.
works. It stumps. I mean, when I was first asked some variation of this, I couldn't answer it. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm a PA.
Yeah.
That's all I know. But
Mm-hmm.
then there's so much more. There's so much more to life than just being in healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah. Or so much more to life than just
Work.
being a millionaire working and all that stuff. Like at the end of the day, you really have to like do things that aligns with your
Hmm.
values and really what makes you as you, because that eventually is what's gonna give you happiness, and not all this high return.
Literally have, like, I mean, I have a client that I'm meeting with later today, and like,
Mm-hmm.
part of her goal is like she doesn't mind working. She doesn't mind. And she's like, I don't
Mm.
think I want to retire. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I dug deep and I'm like, oh, it's true. Like you really do like practicing medicine. Then
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to quit. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. And
Yeah.
she's like, I just want a little bit more flexibility. So I'm like,
Mm.
oh, we could do that. You don't have to
Yeah.
be a millionaire to do that. We can just make some changes. And that's perfect for her. Like you mentioned, everyone has their own goal, their own solution. So like it's not
Mm-hmm.
just because you've done it, just because I've done certain
Yeah.
things, doesn't mean it's right for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, even with the retirement, like I was just, saying earlier, that what may be enough for me when I retire may not be enough for someone else. Because what if I actually plan on living in the Philippines in a little
There we
hut
go.
in the Philippines with no, with no car or whatever? Like, you'll never know what the goal is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so uh, you mentioned you have a client. Can you let us know how, our audience can reach you, connect with you?
Yeah. So, easiest place would probably be, it would be, so I have a website. It's called
Okay.
thefinancehospital.com. I tried to make a clinic, but that was taken. So it's thefinancehospital.com. That's a good place to learn about, my wife and I, our journey, and then like what we do with the clients we
Mm-hmm.
work with, right? We work with PAs, NPs, nurses, pretty much anybody, because like
Yeah.
finance is really, it's universal.
Mm-hmm.
There are unique advantages that healthcare providers have. So, I try to focus on that a little bit more. The other place you can find me is, Instagram, where I share case studies, I share everything I know.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, right? We don't gatekeep. It's like, well,
Yeah.
there's enough money out there, and we all work really hard, and it was really hard to find this information in the first
Mm-hmm.
place. So like, here it is, because we
Yeah.
all deserve to be happy, and we all
Yeah.
deserve to be, living life on our own terms.
Mm-hmm. And I love that because it really shows like the abundance mindset. Like you have such a abundant mindset to where like, this kind of things, just because like this information, just because you share it with other people does not mean that it's taking away from you,
Hmm.
or like even like it's so hard to have this mindset, especially because it comes from your past experiences and everything. But I would say one of the first steps too, on top of getting educated, is also working on how you think about money, like the money mindset, like having that abundance mindset, because it really will help a lot when you have that, like as you go through your investing journey. But what would you give us like one tip before we end this podcast? I didn't even realize we're like way over an hour already. Like honestly, I could talk with Wilson like forever about this kind of stuff. Like I just love having like friends that I could talk about deep stuff like this, that we would just like go on like about these
Yeah.
philosophical things. Like I really love that. And we could go on, but we don't have much time and I don't want to take too much of Wilson's time. So what number one tip would you like want to tell our audience who are nurses working their full-time jobs right now?
Ooh, one tip. That's a
Yeah,
that's a
I know it's so hard. There's so many.
I'm I'm a double down on the tip I gave earlier,
Mm-hmm.
where I do really believe in like role models and mentors, and really finding like if you're listening to this and you're wondering like if you don't know like what you want yet in life, that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing you can do is like collect data and find
Mm-hmm.
out like what are all the options out there. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of like nurses, healthcare professionals doing really cool things. Like you're following Elaine, right? Maybe you'll follow me and
Mm-hmm.
just see like what's possible and try to learn about their stories. And if there's alignment in, how you grew up, how we grew up in our careers, then
Mm-hmm.
you can do it too.
Yeah.
And then I would urge you to reach out. I
Yeah.
promise a lot of us were friendly. Reach
Yeah.
out. We have a lot of us have the abundance mindset, and you'd
Yeah.
be surprised when you if you've been surrounded by scarcity, whether it's through work or whether it's through finances your whole life, and then you meet someone with abundance for the first time, it like rocks your world.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I can't believe like they're just giving this to me,
Yeah.
and I can't believe they're that helpful. But
Mm-hmm.
then they're out there. We exist. We exist. Reach out. And if you're willing to put in the work, you're willing to educate yourself, like you'd be surprised like how much information's out there and what's possible.
Yeah. No, I love that because honestly, we love being reached out to. Like I don't know. I do you know human design?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, like so human design, it's kind of like astrology, but it's based on like when you're born,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that kind of stuff. But anyways, like my human design is projector, which is this could be another podcast. But as a projector, like one of the main things with me is that I don't like to talk unless I'm invited to talk or like
Hmm.
unless I'm asked about my opinion. Like I don't give opinions or like advice or recommendation like typically unless someone asks for it. So being invited, being reached out to is probably one of the best things that I cherish like when it comes to like, being on social media. So if you guys are have any questions like Wilson, I don't know if he's a projector too.
I
We want
am.
to be
I
reached
am.
out to.
Yeah,
You
yep, I'm a
are?
projector. Yeah, for sure.
No, we want to be reached out to. So our DMs are open and all of Wilson's like information is going to be in the show notes. And feel free to reach out to him, check him out. Definitely a good resource for healthcare workers when it comes to finances. And if you just have any question, whether it's real estate or anything, like I'm pretty sure his DM is open.
Yeah, no, it is. I get messages all the time, and like
Mhm.
we're like that in real life. I mean, sure, there's a lot. I'm sure we get a lot of messages now, but
Yeah.
we find time, right?
Yes,
Because
definitely.
someone helped us one day, and we
Hmm.
always want to give it back.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Wilson, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.